Hi there, Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video, we are going to continue our look at painting Sigvald the Magnificent from Age of Sigmar. And in this video, we are going to work on his cloaks, the one that hangs around his midriff, as well as the one that hangs over his shoulders. And these are really fantastic bits. You can see both of them have been left on some sprue. That's just to make it easier to paint them. I have primed them using Res White, using a Patriot 105 at around 25 psi, and I'm going to use some Mephiston Red from Citadel Air in a Patriot 105, spraying it around 20 psi. You can see there with all the little spiderwebs. Again, it's just to run the test. And here with this, I don't think I laid any thinner down in the color, and I'm only spraying the top portion of each of the details because I'm going to go for a two-tone effect here on these details. You can see it looks pretty speckly when we're first laying it down. That's just because I'm working my way fairly slowly. I did not thin the colors down with anything. I'm pretty sure I was going for a straight up base coat here, and I'm just using the higher PSI because I'm just really not that concerned with basically like laying any of or overspray onto the opposite side of the details yet. We're using some Celestra Gray. This is regular Citadel stuff. Threw it into the airbrush. I think I added a drop of water or two to this just to thin it down, just to help with flow. But here basically we're going to lay this onto the bottom portions of each of those details. Again, this is a base coat, so it's going to get applied in a fairly generous fashion here. Again, I always just test the brush and the flow just before I commit it to a model surface. Again, with the higher PSI, the paint just pretty much travels in one direction. You can see there's a little bit of speckling on the one cloak there, but I'm not too worried about that. Shyish Purple is next from Citadel Contrast, and we're going to use a Renegade Chrome from Badger. And this is just for a little bit more control, so we're going to use this smaller needle size here. The PSI, I believe I went between using a 20 PSI and a 10 PSI. I kind of just switched it up just a little bit as I was working a little closer in. And with this, I'm simply slowly building up. I don't think I thinned the contrast down with anything. I'm pretty sure I didn't. You shouldn't have to. It's really, really quite thin. And with this, I just begin building up the shadows, and because it's a contrast, it is mostly a transparency, and it allows you, as long as you're not hammering down on the trigger too much, you can get a nice even flow with the color. Although you'll see the brush come out of frame here quite a bit. I'll put the project down, and then basically what I'm doing is I'm clearing the dry tip as when you are working with a lot of these colors and you're working with lower PSI and thinner paints, you do often get a more instance of dry tip on a surface, or on your needle I should say, and it does have to be cleared periodically, just the nature of airbrushing. And you can see there with the purple, we're slowly building up. And again, because I am working with a lower PSI, I can come right in close to the model and slowly build those transitions up. And again, it's pretty straightforward. This is one of the beauties of using an airbrush in this instance, especially when using very, very thin pigmented materials such as inks and airbrush paints. Here, I'm just quickly testing, making sure the flow is right. And with this part, I'm not going to build the shadows too intensely, but then I decided, well, why not? Because I kind of did it on the upper. And this one hangs from like his belt line, so this is going to get actually quite a bit of shadow, really, if you're kind of really a stickler for where light is falling on the surface. And again, with most miniatures, we don't really get that caught up in how shadows fall on a surface or anything like that. Again, you'll notice that every time I do begin a new little stroke or brush stroke onto the surface, I do check the PSI and how the paint is flowing, just so that I'm not starting it when facing the project, because that's when you get big splatters and things like that on your project, and don't do it. It's just a huge pain, because then you got to come back with your previous colors and correct it and all that rigmarole. Here you can see it's a fairly intense shadow I'm laying down. Again, though, I realized that after laying all this color down, I was like, well, I'm probably going to have to build this up anyway, so why not just build a really intense shadow? Again, because we're working really nice and close, we're not too worried about the overspray getting onto the opposite side. Mephiston Red, we're just slapping a little bit into our brush here. You can see it's a generous amount of thinner in there. It's probably more than a 1-to-1. It's probably more thinner than paint. This is just so that it can lay on top, but anywhere where I want to have a smoother gradient of color, wherever the shadows are falling, I can slowly build to that effect. And you can see here, I do start my brush stroke off on the highest point, but then I do feather it out towards where the shadows are falling. I don't want to change what or how intense it is in the shadows. I'm only looking to reinforce really the red and push that shadow back a bit and allow for a little bit more transition between the two. But otherwise, I just simply build up the color on these high points, and you can see that it's still wet and everything like that as we lay the color down. Here on this one, you can see like the fold on the left, how it kind of like doubles over before it gets to the main portion. I do want to fix that, as that got a little too dark in that area, but otherwise, again, it's just slowly building up the color. You can see here I'm laying a little bit more down. You can see we're bringing some of that red back, and then on the main portion in the center, we do lay more color down. And of course, we're building more intensity towards the end of the cloth and allowing it to stay darker, closer to where it gathers towards where the body will be. Here you can see again, I'm just laying more of that red down. And again, because there is so much thinner in it, we do have to wait until the previous layer is dry before laying another one down, just because you run the risk of the spider webbing or spider legs. If you do work with the color too long in an area, and you'll see the color will fall and into recesses, and it'll do that little spider leg thing. Again, you don't want that. We're going to use some Evil Sun Scarlet next. And I don't think I added it to the previous mixture of Mephiston Red. I might have, just to slowly build this up. Come to think of it now, I think I might have added it to the Mephiston Red just to give me a 50-50 mixture. Pretty much that was the goal. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what I did. I did a 50-50 mixture. I didn't show it on camera here, I don't know why, or maybe I lost the clip. I don't know, one of the two. But either way, I think you guys kind of get how I work with these colors, especially when doing a lot of this airbrushing on model surfaces. Here you can see we're just simply building up that color. Again, I'm not too worried about, like those big or those little folds on the left and right, as the big main portion of that fold really is where the eye kind of gathers, and you can see how intense that shadow is. And again, this is between this hangs from his belt. So like there's that cloth that hangs between his legs. There's this cloth that's hanging at his belt. And then of course his big cloak. So a lot of the work we're doing here, I'm not even 100% sure it's going to be noticeable. But either way, we are building up the color here. Again, just laying more down. The color is fairly thin. Again, because I'm pretty sure that's what we were working with was the previous mixture of Mephiston Red. And we added just a drop of Evil Sun Scarlet. Next, we're going to take some Wild Rider Red, and it is very thinned out. I'm pretty sure I also did a more than 1-to-1 ratio with this, so it's more thinner than it is paint. Again, this is just so that as we're laying this down, and I'm pretty sure I also brought the PSI down to about 10 PSI, and slowly work the color in from the end of the cloak, and that was it. And just basically working at that high point and just slowly building up that color, and just at the corners of the cloak. But otherwise, this color is not going very far. It is really just like maybe, I don't know, less than a centimeter, a couple millimeters, half a millimeter. No, not half a millimeter, half a centimeter. You know what I mean. You probably don't know what I mean, but either way, again, it's a very, very minimal amount of highlights we're laying down on this, and we're just building just to that Wild Rider Red, and it's just so that we keep a nice, deep, dark red going on. Basilicum Gray from Citadel Contrast. We're going to continue our work with the Renegade Chrome, spraying it around, I think it's around 20 PSI. I'm working this first initial part, although I might change it as I get closer. It all depends. Again, when you are working with a finer needle, and you are working closer to your project, you do want to change your PSI between areas. It all depends on what you're doing and what kind of finish you're looking for. So again, it's something that you end up working towards as you build experience with your airbrushing. Here you can see I'm laying it down again with this initial layering of color. You can see there's some a little bit of spackling. I think it's because I am working with a higher PSI, and then so at one point I do work a little bit lower as I get closer into some areas. But with the basilicum gray, the whole point was just to build a nice deep dark shadow in those areas. And this is the underside of the cloak, and so I'm not 100% sure how this is even going to look once this is all attached. I don't even know how noticeable this is going to be really, but we're painting it anyway, and we're building, and we're giving it its just time as well, because it's going to be a lot of fun. Again, when the brush does leave the scene and it does look like we are paused for a moment, that's because I am clearing off the needle of the dried paint, the dry tip. And I do have other videos on dealing with dry tip as well. And some areas you can see we're building up a really intense shadow, and some areas not so much. Again, it's kind of just personal preference. I am not, building up some sort of realistic highlighting scheme, because again, on the underside of cloak, really, would you have this level of shadowing and highlighting? I don't think so. Celestra Gray is next. We're going to slap this into the airbrush. I'm pretty sure I have this I think, better than a 1-to-1 mix ratio in the cup of the brush. I'm still working at around 20 to 10 psi. And with this, I am slowly building that color back up and getting a bit more of the gray tones towards the end of the cloak. So you can see here, I'm trying to work some of the brush strokes, building up color towards the end of the cloak, allowing it to get deeper as where the detail, comes close to the body of the model, as it were. And otherwise, we're just basically pushing some of these shadows back, getting a bit more control under how dark these areas do go. As Celestial Gray is actually fairly dark. You can see some of these areas, it almost looks black, but that's that basilicum gray, and it's really, to the eye, it's not that dark. But on camera here, just because of contrast and stuff and the way it looks under the lights. Again, because we are, constantly clearing the tip off, we do pause the work as we go. But again, when you are laying the color and you're kind of doing this back and forth, you are using a lot of paint, but to get a nice smooth gradient, it is hard to complain about the results you get with an airbrush. Next, we're going to throw a bit of white scar into the brush, and with this, we are basically going to, I think it's fairly thinned out too. I think it's a 1-to-1 thinning of the paint. And again, with this, it is just building up more intensity towards the end of the cloak, and anywhere where I can basically follow the lay of the land, as it were, we're basically just pushing those bright points, following the folds of the cloth. Again, when you are doing that kind of thing, you do have to turn the PSI down a good deal. About 10 psi is usually my working speed. That's usually close enough where I can actually draw little lines and things like that with the airbrush. Again, you can see we're just simply clearing the tip, and it does require, because again, the way I often work is I will start the air and then slowly ease the trigger forward. And when you are working with more air than paint, as you are moving your way across the model, you are creating more instances of a dry tip, as it were. It does sound kind of funny, but that's pretty much what we're doing. And with this white, it's a slow build, and because I'm looking for those middle tones, and because we have the paint in a fairly thinned out consistency, we get these really nice bright points like that. And then finally here, we're going to just take some of the pure white scar, slap it onto our palette, and then we're going to do a quick little edge just at the brightest points. But we're also going to push that outside of where it gets brighter. So where it goes to a pure white, we're going to build that edge out towards, the deeper grays. And that's just to help frame these areas and just bring a bit of visual interest. And I had considered doing a kind of a cloth effect, either by using brushstroke or using sponge or anything like that, but then decided against it, as I just wanted to, continue my work around this project and kind of get it done and demonstrate this all to you. And of course, the overall effect, this deep red with the bright white, and the darker gold, as we've been working our way through, is definitely going to have a deeper, different vibe, I think, than what the model normally is going to get painted like. But that's half the fun of painting, and the interpretations of how we look at models. Huge thank you to my patrons. Without their support, these videos would not be possible. If you're considering Patreon support, click the link in the description below. And there are varying tiers of support, and a huge thank you to everybody who does. Take care of those brushes, and they will take care of you.